I'm so honored to be here. I'm so honored to be here amongst friends, people that I've had a chance to meet over my couple visits to Newfoundland. I'm so honored to have been here with my two colleagues, Jack Harris and Ryan Cleary, who I enjoy working with, both fierce feminists that I count on as brothers that support our demands in our communities and our demands at the national level. And I'm so honored to be here with Lorraine Michaels, Jerry, George, and your team here at home. Some of you that were part of our meeting earlier today on my private member's motion heard that I have a bit of a personal connection with Lorraine. I don't remember quite when it started. It was during my feminist indoctrination, which started very young. But my mom worked with Lorraine Michaels as part of they were activists together in the National Action Committee for the Status of Women. So I would get dragged to various meetings, and that's how it really began for me, my exposure to feminist activism and social justice activism. And I remember years later when I put my name forward and ran in the nomination in my own home community, and I was at the NDP convention. This was, I think, 2006, and I ran into Lorraine Michaels, and at the end of the day, and I said, yeah, and I really had a chance to meet Lorraine Michaels. And my mom was just totally, in a way, starstruck, I guess, and you got to meet Lorraine? And just so always in my household, all the way over in northern Manitoba, I from a young age, I remember, and then later on in life, I got to know a strong woman who inspires me in my work. So I'm so thrilled to be here. I'm so honored to have been asked to be part of the inaugural Nancy Riche Forum. I want to thank Amanda Will for her persistence, her numerous emails, where she finally said, Lana and Barb said yes. You need to say yes, Niki. So, and I said yes. But it's truly, I'm so humbled to have been asked to be part of the first event of this kind. For us in Canada, and it's no mystery to many of us, women's equality has been under attack for some time. While we've never reached or realized the dreams that our mothers have fought for years, we were gaining ground. And over the last about 15 years, or a little bit more, we've been slowly losing it. And I would argue in the last 7 or 8, we've been losing it even faster. Mr. Harper and his government made no mystery of the fact that when they first got into power, one of the first things they did was they went after women's equality by removing the very statement from the mandate of the Status of Women. They went on to cut funding to women's advocacy, and then they moved on to women's research, and then they moved on to the service organizations that every day do the heavy lifting of trying to achieve not just equality, but safety for women across our country. And then they repealed pay equity legislation, telling Canadians that the fight for pay equity could now be brought to the negotiating table, as though labor unions don't have enough to fight for. And then they went after a woman's right to choose, where time and time again, an issue that was settled when I was 6 years old in 1988 through the Supreme Court decision gets trudged up as member after member in an elected government makes it their priority to go after women's reproductive rights and women's equality. And more recently, I know many of us, and I'm sure many of us in this room, have been gripped by not just their inaction, but frankly their willful neglect of the national tragedy that is missing and murdered Indigenous women in our country. As Barb pointed out, I represent northern Manitoba. In fact, I'm honored to represent 33 First Nations and many Métis communities. I've met women that have been murdered. I've met women that have fallen through the cracks usually in our urban centers. And I've sat with the families, and I know many of you have done the same, and I heard about the powerful vigil you had just yesterday. And to know that our federal government, a government that is elected to represent all the people, sits by as this national shame continues to happen. National Aboriginal organizations have been calling for an inquiry and for action. Premiers from across the country called for action and inquiry. International organizations like Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch has looked to Canada and pointed to our inaction and called for leadership on this front. And I would argue that you don't have to look further than that very issue to see the way in which Mr. Harper and his government view women's safety and the need for women to be not just protected, but the need to work together to make sure that we feel safe and empowered in our communities. As the Status of Women critic, I have the honor of visiting across the country and talking, listening to activists, listening to women leaders. And one of the issues I do want to raise that we've been working a lot on is the need for a national action plan to end violence against women. And I would urge you to sign the petition that's outside and keep connected in terms of this campaign that we have. You may not know this, but Canada is the only amongst like-minded countries that does not have a national action plan to end violence against women. On issue after issue, I'm very proud of our NDP activism in the House, fighting for women's equality. Child care is certainly a key part of that argument when we're talking about OAS and GIS and the need for a strong Canadian pension plan. The need for pay equity and making sure that our work and training, and particularly in the trades, engages women. On issue after issue, we bring a feminist lens to the table. And as I go across the country and meet women who are part of these organizations that have been cut, women who may come to a community meeting but are afraid to have their picture taken or have their words read out because they're worried that their funding will be lost. One of the things I hear is the need to have hope. And I can tell you, I've seen that hope here. I saw that today, and I see that hope time and time again across our country. That in the midst of the darkest of political times, because that's exactly what we're living in, and this week is no exception, there are women of all ages that are organizing in their communities, and organizing not just in their physical communities, but also in their labor communities, that are organizing in the environmental community, that are organizing in the Indigenous community, and that are bringing, for some of them, bringing back the notion of the importance of feminist activism. And I would say that's especially the case amongst younger women. And I met some fierce feminist activists, young activists earlier today. You have young women that are hearing from those that have gone before us, that are hearing about the kind of networks and organizations and supports that used to exist, and how maybe our activism may look different. We need to learn how it used to happen. We need to build bridges with women of other generations, but we also need to go forward and make sure that feminism isn't something of the past, and that we make it clear to our sisters and brothers that it is integral to us moving forward. And because our work as MPs, as you know from your own NDP MPs, means doing some work, some organizing work, I also want to bring to your attention an initiative that I'm part of as an NDP MP. Next Thursday, we're holding a women's forum, one-of-a-kind gathering that I'm so honored that the COC is supporting. Women across the country will be tuning in and taking part in a unique conversation about how we build a feminist agenda going into 2015. And some people said, well, you know, why a feminist agenda, not a women's agenda? Because you can't be afraid to say the F word. And that's what we do. educating in our communities is not enough. The capacity we've lost, the connections we've lost are significant. And that requires us to engage in political advocacy. And part of that engagement means supporting strong feminist women in our movement. And really that's why I wanted to be here, to soak in some of Nancy Riche's legacy, but to show my support for the work of Lorraine, of Jerry, of women, and I appreciate feminist brothers like George, but to say that we as feminist activists need to move beyond the work of activism in various ways and work together to elect women, feminist women, NDP women that will make a difference for all of us. So as we sit here tonight, remembering, honoring Nancy Riche, and I wish I would have known her personally. Your description, Lana and Barb, and Mary made me think of women back home that are the very reason why I'm standing with you before you here today. As we remember Nancy Riche's legacy, let's carry it on by continuing to stir the pot and shake the ground in each of our communities, but never forgetting that ultimately difference will come when we connect our work at the community level and the engagement with political change. Now, I know many of you have on your minds, and I really appreciate that many of you did in our few minutes before that you came up, and we had a brief conversation about this week. I'm sure a number of you may have had a chance to talk with Jack or Ryan, and I'm sure in the coming days and weeks you will have that too. I think what happened this week we'll continue to learn from for days. But one of the first things that came to mind was for me how important it is to have feminist analysis and feminist policies as we go forward. Because what I think we saw this week is the darkest side of masculinities that are perpetrated in our country, of the kind of aggression and violence that often, particularly men in our communities and boys, get exposed to. And I think we need a unifying force, and I would argue an NDP force, but a unifying force that you can find in feminism that is about equality for all of us, that is about working together so that we're all better off. And as we go forward, I take strength from the words of a leader that I know inspired many of us, a fierce feminist himself, Jack Layton, who said, "Love is better than fear. Love is better than anger. Hope is better than fear. Optimism is better than despair. Let's keep up the fight." Thank you very much.